Two things hit me before my morning coffee that day. First, the photo that changed everything. Second, the silence that followed. I was sitting by the kitchen window, sunlight slipping through the blinds, scrolling through Instagram like I always did when the house felt too quiet. My friends were posting vacation selfies, church brunches, birthday cakes, and then there it was. A wedding photo. My son, Cameron, standing tall in a crisp white suit, his hand resting gently on the waist of a woman I'd never met. Her dress shimmered like sunlight on water. They were smiling. Everyone around them, her family, his friends, looked so proud, so complete. And I wasn't there. No tag. No mention. No text before or after. Just a sea of comments saying things like "Congratulations to the beautiful couple," and "Finally tied the knot." I felt my hands go cold around the phone. My heart wasn't just breaking, it was realizing. Realizing I had just become a stranger in my own son's life. For a moment, I thought maybe it was a photo shoot. Maybe he was modeling, or filming something for work. But then I saw the caption beneath it. "Forever begins here." There were hearts and doves and even a "Mom would be proud" comment from someone who didn't know me at all. That line stung the most. Because I was alive. And very much not invited. I read it again and again, my eyes refusing to believe what they saw. You ever have a moment that doesn't just hurt, but erases something inside you? Like every birthday cake you baked, every school lunch you packed, every late-night worry suddenly meant nothing? That's what it felt like. And the strangest part was, I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, staring at that perfect little photo, wondering when exactly I lost my place in his story. We used to talk every evening. He'd call me from work just to ask what I was having for dinner. He'd laugh when I told him about the neighbor's noisy dog. Then months passed. Calls got shorter. Messages slower. Until silence became normal. And I told myself he was just busy. That's what mothers do, we defend our children even when the knife's already in our back. But nothing prepares you for that kind of betrayal. Not the kind where someone hates you, the kind where they forget you. When I finally put my phone down, I felt like the room had changed. Like even the walls knew something I didn't. You know what's funny? The morning sun still looked beautiful. The coffee still tasted the same. But I wasn't the same. And before I even realized it, I whispered to the empty kitchen. He got married, and I wasn't there. That's how I found out. Through a stranger's screen. Through digital confetti and heart emojis. I wish I could tell you I screamed or broke something. But I didn't. I just sat there quietly, staring at the boy who used to say, "Mom, when I make it, you'll never have to worry again." Maybe that was the first lie he ever told. And that's how I learned, my son got married without me. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you call him? Confront him? Or just disappear the way he did to you? Tell me in the comments, I need to know if I'm crazy for what I did next. People always tell me I'm strong. They say it like it's a compliment, but sometimes strength just means you had no choice. When Cameron's father left, my son was barely 2 years old. I remember standing in that old apartment, holding a toddler on one hip and a stack of unpaid bills in my other hand, thinking, this isn't how it was supposed to go. We didn't have much, but we had laughter. We had late-night cartoons and instant noodles. I'd work double shifts at the diner, come home smelling like coffee and grease, and still find the energy to dance with him in the kitchen. He used to press his tiny hand against my cheek and say, "Don't be sad, Mom. I'm your little man." That boy saved me. Every single day, he gave me a reason to wake up and fight again. I still remember the first time he got straight A's. I couldn't afford to buy him a bike, so I painted his old skateboard silver and told him it was custom. He believed me, and his smile could have lit up the entire block. I took pictures of everything, his first day of school, his high school graduation, even that one Thanksgiving when we burned the turkey and ate cereal instead. Our walls were covered with memories. Every photo told a story of how far we'd come together. But somewhere along the line, Cameron started changing. After college, he landed a corporate job. Suddenly, his clothes got sharper, his words more polished, his visits less frequent. He'd still come home on holidays, bringing fancy gifts I never asked for. But the warmth in his hugs felt different. Once, during dinner, I told him how proud I was, and he smiled politely and said, "You don't have to worry about me, Mom. One day, I'll give you something better." Something better. I didn't understand it then, but those words never left me. It wasn't pride in his voice, it was embarrassment. Embarrassment of me. Of where we came from. Of the way I still folded napkins neatly at the dinner table or wore second-hand sweaters to church. Still, I loved him fiercely. I told myself every mother goes through this stage, when your child grows up and starts needing you less. But I never imagined he'd reach a point where he'd erase me completely. I tried calling him one weekend. Straight to voicemail. Sent a message, no reply. 2 weeks later, I saw him tagged in a photo at some charity event, smiling with people who looked like they'd never known struggle. That's when I felt the quiet fear for the first time, that maybe love doesn't always bring people closer. Sometimes, it teaches them how to leave more gently. Still, I kept the faith. I kept his old room clean, his trophies polished, and his favorite blanket folded neatly on his bed. I waited. For a visit. A call. A text. Anything. And when the silence stretched too long, I told myself, "He's just busy, Elaine. Don't take it personally. But you can't mother empty air forever." That's why, the morning I saw that wedding photo, it didn't just break my heart, it confirmed something I'd been pretending not to see for years. My son didn't just drift away. He built a whole new life, and made sure I wasn't in it. And yet, I couldn't hate him. I still can't. Because love doesn't switch off, it lingers, it questions, it tortures. And deep down, I was still that same woman standing in the diner's kitchen, whispering to a child who once promised, "I'll never leave you, Mom." Would you forgive a child who could do that to you? Or would you finally walk away and protect what's left of your heart? Because what I did next shocked even me. They say the hardest goodbyes are the ones you don't notice until they're already over. For me, it started the day Cameron moved to DC. He'd gotten a job at a finance firm, a real job, as he called it. I remember standing in his empty bedroom after he left, his trophies still on the shelf, the air still smelling faintly of his cologne. It didn't feel like he was gone, not yet. It just felt quieter. At first, I was proud. Every mother dreams of that moment, your child stepping into the world, ready to make his own name. I even told the ladies at church, "My son's in DC now, working in finance." I said it with pride, but maybe a little fear too. He'd call every few days in the beginning. Short calls, sometimes on his lunch break, sometimes late at night. "How's work?" I'd ask. "Tiring, Mom." "But I'm good," he'd say. He always sounded distracted, like his mind was somewhere else. I'd tell him about things around the neighborhood, the Wilsons' new dog, how I planted tomatoes in the backyard. He'd chuckle politely but never asked for photos like he used to. Then the calls became weekly. Then monthly. Then they stopped coming from him entirely. I'd call sometimes, and it would ring until voicemail. "Hey, Cam, it's Mom. Just checking in. Hope you're eating well." I left those little messages like breadcrumbs, hoping he'd follow them home someday. He rarely called back. One time, after 2 weeks of silence, I dialed his number while my coffee sat on the counter, growing cold beside me. It rang and rang. I watched the phone light up and dim again, my reflection flickering in the black screen. That silence, the kind where you know someone's choosing not to answer, felt heavier than any argument could. But I defended him anyway. "He's just busy," I told myself. That's what successful people are. I repeated that line like a prayer. Still, something inside me began to ache in places I couldn't name. There were days I'd set an extra plate at the table out of habit. Nights I'd hear a sound and think he'd finally come home. But it was always just the wind through the old windows. It's funny how a house can start to feel bigger once the person you built it for stops showing up. My coworkers would ask how he was doing, and I'd smile. "Oh, he's great," I'd lie, trying to sound casual. But deep down, I wondered if I had done something wrong. Maybe I'd called too often. Maybe I'd asked too many questions. Maybe success required a little distance, and I just didn't understand how to love from afar. You ever been in that place, where silence becomes your new normal, but it still feels like noise in your chest? That's where I lived for months. I'd scroll through his old photos, his graduation, his first car, his crooked smile when he chipped his tooth playing basketball. I tried to remember that boy. Because the man on the other end of the phone, he was becoming a stranger I couldn't reach anymore. Then one day, he stopped answering altogether. No explanation. No goodbye. Just a wall of silence where my son used to be. And I didn't know it then, but that silence wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of something much darker. Have you ever felt someone slowly disappear from your life? Would you chase after them, or let them fade away on their own? Tell me what you do, because I still wonder if I handled it right. The first time I heard her name, it was by accident. I was folding napkins in the diner after a long shift when my coworker, Denise, said, "Elaine, I didn't know your son was dating that model-looking girl. I saw them online, so cute together." I froze for a second, napkin half folded in my hands. "What girl?" I asked. She scrolled through her phone. "Her name's Serena something. I think she's in marketing?" "They look serious." My stomach tightened. I hadn't heard Cameron mention anyone named Serena. Not once. When I got home, I sat on my couch, opened my phone, and typed his name into the search bar. His profile came up, but it was private now. Private. As in, locked away, like I wasn't meant to see his life anymore. Still, I noticed something new, a woman's name tagged in his recent posts. Serena J_. I clicked on it. Her page was public. She was beautiful. Polished. The kind of woman who wore designer sneakers to charity events. Her captions were all about manifesting dreams and building an empire. And there, in one of her posts, was Cameron, his hand around her waist, both of them smiling like they'd known each other forever. It wasn't the smile that hurt me. It was the way he looked comfortable, like he belonged in her world. I scrolled through every photo, looking for clues. He never once mentioned me. Not a comment, not a tag, not even a "mom raised me right." I sent him a message. Nothing harsh, just a simple line. "Hey, honey. I saw your photos. You look happy. Call me when you can. Love, Mom." It showed seen. But no reply. I waited. Hours. Then days. Then weeks. You know what that kind of silence does? It makes you question your worth. I'd raised this boy with everything I had. And now, one woman's presence was enough to erase all that history. My friends tried to comfort me. "Give him space," they said. Men pull away when they're serious about someone. But something about that advice didn't sit right. Why would love require silence? Why would being serious mean cutting out the person who made you who you are? I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, open my phone, and scroll through Serena's page like I was searching for proof that this wasn't real. Then one evening, I saw it, a comment under one of Serena's posts. It read, "Countdown to forever." My breath caught in my throat. Forever? I scrolled through the comments again, but it was gone. Deleted. Like it was never meant to be seen. Was she talking about Cameron? Was that their way of announcing something? I tried messaging him one more time. No reply. So I messaged her. Just one sentence. "Please tell my son to call his mother." the message was never opened. And that night, lying awake, I couldn't help but ask myself, when did my son become someone who could ignore me so easily? There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream, it just sits quietly in your chest, replaying every good memory until they start to hurt too. Still, I told myself to let it go. Maybe it was just a phase. Maybe I was overthinking. But a mother always knows. Something about this woman, about this silence, it didn't feel like a coincidence. And deep down, I knew, something was coming. What would you do if your child's new partner started changing them? Would you step in, or stay silent and hope for the best? Because when I finally learned what forever meant, it shattered everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty. I thought heartbreak was loud, screaming, breaking plates, doors slamming. But that morning, it was quiet. The kind of quiet that hums behind your ribs like a muted siren. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee when I decided, against my better judgment, to check social media again. I told myself I was over it. I told myself I didn't care that Cameron hadn't replied to my texts in months. But mothers lie to themselves more than anyone else. And then, there it was. A tagged photo. His name glowing blue, his smile brighter than I'd seen in years. And beside him, a woman in white. The kind of white that blinds you before it blesses you. A wedding gown. My throat tightened. At first, I thought maybe it was a styled shoot. Maybe someone made a mistake. But then the next photo loaded, Cameron at the altar, hand in hand with her. A crowd of faces I didn't recognize. Laughter, champagne, bouquets. My son's wedding. A day I never knew was coming, and apparently, never meant to. Every swipe of my finger felt like a cut. There he was, dancing, kissing his bride. Serena, I'd only seen her once, through a coworker's gossip. But now she looked like she belonged in a life that no longer included me. And yet, there was something off. In one of the photos, Cameron's smile didn't reach his eyes. His jaw was tight. His fingers clutched the champagne glass like it was anchoring him. I zoomed in, that old habit mothers have, and saw it. That same furrow in his brow he had when he used to lie about eating his vegetables. My heart said he's not happy. But my mind said he chose this. I kept scrolling. His in-laws, well-dressed, confident, standing proudly beside the couple. They looked like the kind of people who send invitations with gold foil lettering. The kind who measure love and status, not sacrifice. And I realized something cruel. They probably didn't even know I existed. My son's story, rewritten without me. That night, I didn't turn off the lights. I just sat in the living room, surrounded by pictures of a boy with scraped knees and birthday hats. The photo wall, our timeline, mocked me. I whispered his childhood nickname into the silence. Cammy, why? The tears came slow at first, then all at once. The kind that choke you mid-breath, make you wonder how grief can live inside the body and not kill you. I wasn't just mourning my son's distance. I was mourning the version of me that believed love was enough. And when the dawn finally broke, I was still sitting there, eyes swollen, coffee cold, staring at a photo that changed everything. He was alive, successful, married, but to me, it felt like he'd died and no one bothered to hold a funeral. Grief makes you do strange things. The day after I saw the photos, I found myself behind the wheel, driving toward Cameron's townhouse, the one we'd bought together when he first landed his finance job in D.C. I'd co-signed the mortgage. I still remembered how proud he was when we got the keys. "Mom, this is just the start," he'd said, handing me a housewarming candle. I kept that candle, unlit, as if saving its flame for something sacred. The GPS still knew the address by heart. My fingers didn't tremble until I saw the street, neat rows of homes with manicured lawns, mailboxes painted in matching colors. It looked the same, but the air felt hollow. When I pulled into his driveway, my chest tightened. No car. No sign of life. The neighbor, a kindly woman with a golden retriever, spotted me and waved. "You must be Cameron's mom," she said. I smiled weakly. Yes. Is he around? She hesitated, shifting on her feet. Oh, he moved out a while ago. Thought you knew. Moved out. The words echoed like footsteps in an empty hallway. I thanked her and walked to the door. My spare key still fit, he hadn't changed the locks. For a moment, I almost hoped I'd find him there, surprised, apologetic. But when I opened the door, the air that met me was stale. Inside, the house was half empty. Drawers open, a few shirts left behind, dust on the counters. The walls still smelled faintly of his cologne, that woody scent I used to tease him about when he first started dating. On the coffee table lay a single photo frame, us, standing in front of that same house the day he moved in. My smile was wide. His arm was around me. I sank to my knees. Everything I'd given him, the nights I stayed awake to cover bills, the meals skipped so he could eat better, the years of working double shifts, it had all led here. An empty house, bought with love and left without goodbye. And then the realization hit me like ice water, my name was still on the mortgage. Every payment, every document, every ounce of security he had built, it was tied to me. My love had financed his new life. My sacrifices had paid for my own disappearance. I sat there for hours, running my fingers over that old photo frame. My mind replayed his promise, one day, Mom, I'll give you something better. Better had come. It just didn't include me. By sunset, something inside me shifted. The tears didn't fall this time. There was only clarity, the kind that comes after you've lost everything worth protecting. I looked around that empty house one last time and whispered, all right, Cameron. If this is the life you wanted. I reached into my bag and pulled out the keys. The metal glinted under the fading light. Then I'll make sure you remember who gave it to you. That's when I made the first decision he'd never forget. When people talk about revenge, they picture fire, something loud, dramatic, uncontrollable. But for me, revenge came quietly. Like closing a door you'd left open too long. The morning after I visited Cameron's empty townhouse, I sat at my kitchen table again, the same one where I'd discovered his wedding photos. The sunlight felt cruel that day, like it was trying to expose every lie I'd ever told myself about him. My phone lay face up beside the coffee mug. I stared at the screen, the contact list blurred by the tears I refused to shed. Then I typed in a number I hadn't dialed in years, the local realtor. Hi, this is Elaine Porter, I said, voice steadier than my hands. I'd like to sell a property. The silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred. Because that sentence, it wasn't about property. It was about freedom. As I drove to meet the realtor that afternoon, memories flooded in. I could still see that day years ago when Cameron stood beside me in this very office, his hand trembling as he signed the mortgage papers. He'd been fresh out of college, his first real job in finance. Mom, he'd said, grinning from ear to ear, one day this will be yours. Or mine. Or both of ours. It's our future. And I'd believed him. I had signed my name below his that day, thinking it was an act of love. Now, years later, it felt like signing my own erasure. The realtor, a friendly woman named Tricia, greeted me with a practiced smile. We can list it right away, Elaine. The market's great for sellers. Her words blurred together, equity, closing date, offers. All I could think about was Cameron's childhood bedroom, how I'd painted it blue because he said the color made him feel safe. Tricia's pen clicked. You're sure about this? I hesitated. The old part of me, the mother part, whispered he's still your son. But another voice, quieter and stronger, replied he made his choice. I'm sure, I said. Later, as I walked through the house one last time, I took my time. Each room felt like a memory I was peeling off the walls. His laughter still echoed faintly in the corners, that deep, youthful laugh that once made every sacrifice feel worth it. I stopped in the living room, staring at the family photo hanging above the mantel. It was the last thing left untouched. The two of us smiling in front of this very house, the day we thought we'd built something permanent. I lifted the frame from the hook. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, older, wearier, but somehow stronger. I wrapped the photo in a towel and placed it gently into my bag. When I handed Trisha the keys, she said, "This must be hard." I smiled faintly. Sometimes letting go feels like revenge, even when it's not. That night, I stood outside the house one final time. The porch light flickered. A light breeze carried the scent of honeysuckle, the same scent from Cameron's high school prom night, when I'd waited up until 2 a.m. just to hear how it went. And as I looked at the darkened windows, I whispered, "Goodbye, my boy. You may have forgotten me, but I remember everything." The door clicked shut behind me, and with that, a chapter closed, quietly, finally, completely. What I didn't know was that my goodbye was about to reach someone I'd never met, someone who held the truth I wasn't ready to face. It started with a voicemail. "Mrs. Porter, this is, well, I suppose you don't know me. My name is Lydia. I'm Serena's mother. Please call me back, it's important." I replayed it 3 times. Her voice trembled, heavy with something between guilt and sorrow. My first instinct was suspicion. Why now? Why reach out to the mother her son had erased? Still, curiosity is a powerful thing, especially when mixed with heartbreak. I called her back that evening. "Mrs. Porter," she said softly. "I had to find your number myself. Cameron wouldn't give it to me." That sentence alone told me everything and nothing. "I hope I'm not crossing a line," she continued, "but after what I learned today, I couldn't stay silent." My heart raced. "What did you learn?" There was a pause on the other end. I could hear her inhale sharply. "I found out that my daughter's husband, your son, told Serena you'd passed away years ago." The room spun. "I'm sorry?" "He said you died. That you were gone. That's why you weren't in their wedding photos. That's why we never met you." Her voice cracked. Serena was devastated when she realized it was a lie. I couldn't breathe. My son hadn't just cut me out of his life, he'd buried me. Lydia's voice quivered as she went on. "He said he was embarrassed, about where he came from. About struggling. He didn't want Serena or us to think less of him." The silence that followed was unbearable. My mind flashed through every sacrifice, every moment I'd told him we didn't need much, that love was enough. And now, that love had been rewritten as shame. "I raised him to be better than that," I whispered. "I know," Lydia said softly. "Serena knows, too. She's angry, Elaine. And she's hurting. She wanted to tell you herself, but she thought it would make things worse. She never meant for any of this." I sat there, phone trembling in my hand, staring at the photo wall in my living room, the only place where my existence still mattered. He hadn't just lied. He'd rewritten history to erase his mother. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. "I needed to hear it, even if it breaks me." After we hung up, I stayed frozen on the couch. No tears this time. Just a strange, heavy stillness. Somewhere in D.C., my son was living a beautiful lie. And I was the ghost he created to keep it alive. I picked up that old family photo again, the one I'd taken from his house. For a moment, I pressed my thumb against his smiling face. "You didn't bury me, Cameron," I whispered. "You just forgot I know how to rise." The next morning, I opened my laptop and searched property sale finalization. The house sold faster than expected. The proceeds were wired into my account within days. As I stared at the numbers on the screen, I didn't feel satisfaction. Just closure. Because what do you do when your own child writes your obituary while you're still breathing? You start rewriting your story, one truth at a time. My son buried me alive, with words. But he was about to learn that ghosts don't stay silent forever. When the phone first rang, I didn't move. The screen lit up across the room, glowing with his name, Cameron. A name that once meant joy now looked like a wound that refused to close. It rang again. And again. Then stopped. For 2 days, it continued, morning, night, random hours in between. He called from his cell, his office, even unknown numbers. I didn't answer a single one. Part of me wanted to. God knows I did. I wanted to hear his voice, to ask him why. But another part of me, the part that had learned to live inside silence, needed him to feel what it was like to be unheard. On the third day, I saw it, one new voicemail. I didn't listen right away. I let it sit there like a storm cloud I wasn't ready to face. That evening, I finally pressed play. Mom, just that word made my throat tighten. He sounded exhausted. Different. Mom, I know you know. About everything. About Serena. About the wedding. About what I said. His voice cracked. I made mistakes. Big ones. I thought I was protecting her, and me, from shame. I told myself lies until I started believing them. Please, just let me explain. Please pick up. The message ended with silence, the kind that says I don't know what else to say. I didn't delete it immediately. I replayed it once, then twice. By the third time, I could barely breathe. He was still my son. But how do you forgive someone who buried you with words? The cursor blinked beside the delete button. My hand trembled. And before I could stop myself, I pressed it. Click. Gone. I set the phone down slowly and stared out the window. The sky was heavy, the color of old bruises. Somewhere out there, my son was probably pacing his apartment, waiting for a mother who had finally learned the power of silence. And yet, even in that silence, guilt crept in. Was I protecting my peace, or punishing him for losing his? I walked to the small table near the window, the one where I used to sit waiting for his calls during college. The same table that once held a candle I'd light whenever he was late coming home. I never told him, but I used to whisper, let him be safe. Let him still need me. That night, I didn't light it. Because for the first time, I realized, maybe he had to find his own light now. I sat in the dark, letting the phone rest face down. But even in the quiet, I could still hear his voice. Please, Mom. Just let me explain. The problem was, explanations don't bring back the dead. But ghosts, it seems, have a way of calling back, even when you're not ready to answer. It was nearly midnight when the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Cameron. Mrs. Porter? The voice was trembling, soft, and desperate. This is Serena. I almost hung up. Not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. I didn't want another apology, another explanation dressed as regret. But her next words stopped me cold. Please don't hang up. I'm not calling for him. I'm calling for you. There was something raw in her tone, not guilt, but grief. She continued, voice cracking. He's not okay. He lost his job last week. They found out about some lies he told, small at first, but they piled up. He told me the truth about everything. About you. About what he did. He's breaking, Elaine. I don't even recognize him anymore. The name, Elaine, sounded strange from her lips. Tender. Honest. I sat in silence, clutching the phone. Serena sniffled. He told me about how you raised him alone. About what you gave up. He said he thought he was protecting you from embarrassment. That's what he told himself. But really, he was protecting his ego. I closed my eyes. Each word hit like rain, steady, cleansing, unwanted but necessary. Then she said the thing that undid me completely. He said he thought if he built a new story, he could love himself more. But he never realized he was killing the only person who ever loved him for who he was. I felt something in me shift. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But pity. The kind that comes when you realize someone is lost in their own lies. He confessed everything, Serena whispered. He told me he doesn't deserve a mother like you. He said he just wants to fix what he broke, even if it's too late. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My throat burned with words I didn't have the strength to speak. "Mrs. Porter," she said finally, "I know you don't owe him anything. But please, just pray for him." When the call ended, I sat for a long time, staring at the candle on the windowsill, the same one from years ago. The one I used to light for Cameron when he was still my little boy. Without thinking, I reached for a match. The flame sparked, small and flickering. As the candle burned, the room filled with the faint scent of wax and smoke. I closed my eyes, letting the light dance behind my lids. That candle had once been a symbol of waiting. Now, it became something else: release. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about forgetting what someone did. Maybe it was about letting go of the version of them that hurt you. I whispered his name into the quiet. Not in anger this time, but in mourning, for the boy he once was, and for the mother I had to stop being. For the first time in years, I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel despair. Just a soft, aching peace. Because maybe the lesson wasn't his to learn, maybe it was mine. But fate wasn't done yet. Sometimes, when you finally let go, that's when the past decides to knock on your door. The morning came with soft rain, the kind that doesn't fall, but lingers in the air like a sigh. I sat by the kitchen window, the candle from the night before still half-burned beside a cup of untouched coffee. The house felt emptier than ever, yet lighter somehow, like it had exhaled with me. The phone hadn't rung in days. Maybe he had stopped calling. Maybe he'd finally accepted my silence. But as the rain tapped against the glass, a thought I'd buried began to rise. It wasn't anger this time. It was something gentler, something closer to grief. I went to the old wooden chest in the corner of the room. Inside were the remnants of a life I'd built around him: his kindergarten drawings, report cards, birthday cards written in wobbly handwriting. And then, tucked beneath an old baby blanket, a pair of tiny blue shoes. His first. I sat with them in my lap, my thumb tracing the worn-out sole. I used to tell him those shoes carried his first steps, the steps that would take him anywhere he dreamed to go. And they did. Just not where I thought they would. That's when the idea came, quiet, like a whisper I didn't know I'd been waiting for. I reached for a sheet of paper and began to write. Dear Cameron, I'm not writing to accuse you, or to demand answers. I've already spent too many years chasing reasons that will never bring peace. I'm writing because I need to let something go, not you, but the ache that followed you. When I saw those wedding photos, I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. I told myself I hated you. But hate is heavy, and it doesn't last. What lasts is love, quiet, bruised, and stubborn. The kind that refuses to die, even when it's been buried alive. You weren't ungrateful, Cameron. You were unready. You thought love had to be perfect before it could be seen. But I wish you knew, I never needed perfect. I only needed true. I forgive you, not because you asked, but because I need peace more than apology. I've learned something these past months: a mother's love isn't about being needed. It's about giving without keeping score, even when no one's watching. And maybe that's what grace really is: the courage to release someone before they're ready to come home. I don't know where life will take you from here. Maybe you'll rebuild. Maybe you'll fall again. But wherever you go, I hope you find the version of yourself that isn't afraid to tell the truth. I'll be okay now. Truly. And I hope someday you will be too. Mom. When I finished, I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into a small ivory envelope. I didn't seal it. Didn't address it. It wasn't meant to travel anywhere. I opened the keepsake box and placed the envelope beside his baby shoes, 2 pieces of him that would always stay here, where he began. As I closed the lid, something inside me settled. For years, my life had revolved around being his anchor. I'd held on even when the storm took him farther than I could reach. But anchors don't save ships. They just hold them still. And maybe it was time to stop holding. I carried the box to the closet shelf and placed it high, where sunlight couldn't fade it. Then I stood there for a while, staring at the empty space it left behind on the table. That emptiness didn't feel like loss anymore. It felt like room for breath, for quiet, for the kind of love that doesn't demand return. The rain had stopped. The world outside shimmered with wet light. I went back to the kitchen and finally took a sip of my cold coffee. It tasted bitter, but alive, like something real, something earned. As I watched the street glisten through the window, a memory surfaced: Cameron as a boy, standing on that same porch with his backpack too big for his shoulders, shouting, "Bye, Mom. I'll make you proud." And he did, in his own complicated way. Not because he was perfect, but because he was mine, and I had learned to love him even through the ruins. I picked up the half-burned candle and relit it, not as a symbol of waiting this time, but of release. The flame wavered for a moment, then steadied, like a heartbeat returning to rhythm. I whispered softly, "Be free, my boy. Wherever you are, just be free." For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a mother abandoned. I felt like a woman who had finally chosen peace. And in that quiet moment, something in me, maybe the part that used to ache every time I thought of him, finally went still. But peace is a strange thing. It arrives gently, and just when you start to trust it, life knocks again. The first morning in the new cabin felt like stepping into a different kind of silence, one that didn't ache anymore. Light poured through linen curtains, warm and slow, the kind that kissed everything it touched. The air smelled faintly of pine and fresh coffee. I stood barefoot by the window, staring out at the lake, still as glass, holding the reflection of the waking sky. For the first time in years, there was no echo of a phone that wouldn't ring, no stack of unopened mail, no ghosts of photographs turned face down. Just me. And the sound of my own breath. I made breakfast: 1 egg, 1 piece of toast, a cup of coffee strong enough to wake a memory. It felt strange at first, cooking for one. But as the butter sizzled on the pan, I realized, this wasn't loneliness. It was space. Space to feel, to breathe, to start again. After breakfast, I walked down to the dock behind the cabin. The water shimmered under the morning sun, and a single duck drifted lazily near the reeds. I dipped my fingers into the cool water and whispered, "This is mine now." Not the pain. Not the waiting. Just this quiet belonging. Later that afternoon, I unpacked the last box, my paints and brushes, untouched for years. I'd stopped painting the day I sold the house. Somehow, every color had felt like betrayal. But now, as I set the small canvas on the easel by the window, the lake light seemed to beg for capture. The first stroke was hesitant, a soft streak of gold against white. Then another, bolder this time. Soon, the blank space became a horizon, and I realized, I wasn't painting the lake. I was painting freedom. A few days later, I met my neighbor. He was an older man, wiry, with silver hair that caught the sunlight and eyes that carried more calm than words ever could. He introduced himself as Mr. Lawson. He lived alone in the cabin next door, with a golden retriever named Scout who seemed to believe every human was put on earth to throw a stick. "You're the new soul on this side of the lake," he said with a smile, handing me a small jar of honey. "Made it myself. Bees do all the work, I just try not to get in their way." I laughed, the first genuine laugh that felt unborrowed. We started talking, the way strangers sometimes do when time slows down enough to make room for honesty. He told me he used to be a high school music teacher. That his wife had passed away 5 years ago. That he had 2 grown children, both living far away, both too busy to visit much. There was a wistfulness in his voice when he spoke about them, but not bitterness. More like acceptance softened by understanding. "I used to think I'd failed them," he said one evening as we sat on his porch, watching the sky melt into amber. "Then I realized, maybe I just raised them to go live their lives, and that's exactly what they're doing." He looked at me then, not probing, just seeing. "You got kids?" I hesitated, then nodded. "A son." He didn't ask more, and I didn't explain. But something in his eyes said he already knew the kind of silence that follows that answer. Days turned into weeks. I began to love the rhythm of this new life, mornings filled with the scent of rain on cedar, afternoons with paint-stained fingers, evenings with Scout's gentle bark echoing down the waterline. Every sunset felt like forgiveness being painted across the sky. One evening, as we shared tea on my porch, Mr. Lawson told me something I've never forgotten. Sometimes, he said, love has to let go to be love at all. I looked at him, the words sinking deep into places I didn't know were still raw. He continued, I used to hold on to things I couldn't fix, my son's choices, my daughter's silence. But love isn't about holding. It's about trusting they'll find their way back when the world humbles them enough to remember home. He leaned back in his chair, the fading light softening his features. I stopped chasing closure. I started praying for peace instead. And peace, well, it doesn't always come the way we expect. Sometimes it just sits beside you quietly, like an old friend. That night, I couldn't sleep. His words kept replaying in my mind. Sometimes love has to let go to be love at all. I got up, walked to my easel, and began to paint again, not the lake this time, but something new. A small cabin beneath a wide sky. A candle glowing in the window. And in the distance, barely visible, the outline of a road winding home. I didn't know if Cameron would ever see it. But I hoped, somehow, that wherever he was, he could feel it, that quiet pulse of forgiveness still burning, even from miles away. The next morning, I found a note on my porch. It was from Mr. Lawson. Gone into town for supplies. If you need anything, Scout knows where to find me. Beneath it, a small drawing of a bee, crooked and funny, but full of life. I smiled. There was something about this place, about the stillness of the lake and the honesty of solitude, that was slowly rewiring me. My heart wasn't healing the way I expected, not by forgetting, but by remembering differently. Cameron wasn't the wound anymore. He was part of the story that made me who I was becoming, a woman who could stand in her own light, even after the shadows left. That evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, I lit a single candle on the porch rail. Not for grief this time. Not even for memory. For gratitude. Gratitude for the still water, the kind neighbor, the canvas slowly filling with color, and for the strange, miraculous fact that even broken hearts can find new homes. I whispered into the fading light, thank you, Lord. For the letting go, and for the staying still. And somewhere across that quiet lake, a breeze lifted, soft, forgiving, almost like an answer. But peace, I've learned, isn't a destination, it's a door. And one evening, that door was about to open again, in the most unexpected way. It had been almost 7 months since I'd last spoken his name aloud. By then, the lake had frozen twice and thawed again, and I had learned how to live in my own silence. The cabin had become my heart's refuge, each creak in the floorboard, each soft hum of the kettle, a reminder that peace wasn't loud. It was steady. That morning was ordinary. The kind of day that slips by unnoticed, warm coffee, sunlight slicing through the curtains, Scout barking in the distance. I was repainting a section of my porch railing when I heard it, the slow crunch of tires on gravel. A car. No one ever drove up that road unless they meant to. I looked up, wiping my paint-smeared hands on my apron, and saw a silver sedan easing to a stop by the mailbox. The door opened, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. It was him. Cameron. Thinner than I remembered. Paler. His once sharp confidence had been replaced by something quieter, almost fragile. He wore a wrinkled dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, tie loose, like he'd been driving for hours without a plan. His hair was unkempt, his face drawn, his eyes red-rimmed, not from anger this time, but exhaustion. I didn't move. He stepped out slowly, as if afraid I'd disappear if he moved too fast. Mom. The word fell from his lips like a confession. Just one syllable, but it cracked open everything I'd sealed shut. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the lake, gentle waves brushing against the dock, the wind moving through the pines. Finally, I said softly, "You found me." He nodded, voice trembling. I didn't know where else to go. We sat on the porch, the same place where I'd learned to breathe again. Now it felt smaller, the air thicker. He told me bits and pieces, not in order, not clean, just the way broken people tell the truth. He'd lost the job months before the wedding. He'd borrowed money to keep up appearances, lied to Serena about his family, about me. When the truth came out, everything collapsed, the marriage, the career, the illusion. I thought I could protect her from where I came from, he said, eyes downcast. From you. From how hard things used to be. He looked up then, and the shame in his eyes was unbearable. I told her you were gone, Mom. Dead. Because I thought if she knew how poor we were, how much you'd sacrificed, she'd look at me different. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd make enough money to make it all right. He laughed bitterly, wiping his face. I guess lies don't age well. I wanted to speak, to say how much that lie had cost me. But my words stayed locked inside. He went on, voice cracking. When the house was gone, I knew it was you. And I didn't even blame you. I realized how much I took without ever saying thank you. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of his chair. Serena left after that. She said she married a stranger. And she was right. He looked at me then, a boy again, not a man. I lost everything, Mom. But I can't lose you too. The sunlight was fading now, turning the lake gold and the air colder. I wanted to forgive him right then. I wanted to reach out, to tell him that pain can't be undone but love doesn't expire. But something inside me hesitated, not out of cruelty, but caution. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't a switch. It was a door that creaked open slowly, one truth at a time. So I said nothing. I just listened. He cried for a while, quietly, shoulders shaking. When he finally looked up, his voice was barely a whisper. Do you hate me? That question pierced deeper than any lie ever could. I looked at him for a long time. Then I said softly, no. I just don't know how to love you the same way anymore. His face crumpled, but he nodded, as if he'd already expected that answer. We sat there in silence, watching the last light fade across the water. Scout wandered up and rested his head on Cameron's knee, sensing something sacred in the stillness. For the first time, my son didn't pull away from quiet. He just sat in it. When he stood to leave, he hesitated by the steps. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. I just needed to see you once more, to know you're okay. He turned to go, but something inside me, a whisper, maybe, or grace itself, stopped me. Cameron. He turned. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small silver key I'd kept on my keychain for years, the spare from the old house. I walked over and pressed it into his palm. This doesn't open any door anymore, I said. But it's a reminder. Some doors close so new ones can open. He stared at the key for a long moment, then at me. I don't deserve this. I smiled weakly. That's what makes it grace. He broke then, not into apologies, but into silence that said more than words could. After he drove off, I sat alone on the porch, candle flickering beside me. The same candle I'd once lit in grief now burned in quiet acceptance. The air was cool, the sky deep blue. Somewhere across the lake, a loon called, long and low. I whispered into the night, I wanted to forgive him. I just didn't know how. The lake didn't answer, but it didn't have to. Because I knew forgiveness was already on its way, slow, trembling, but coming. But life has a strange way of finishing what the heart begins. And 2 weeks later, I'd learned that sometimes, forgiveness doesn't wait for permission, it just shows up again, this time, in the form of a letter. The night he left, the world felt impossibly still. The lake barely moved, just a ripple here and there, as if holding its breath with me. The gravel road that curved away from the cabin shimmered faintly under the moonlight, and the only sound was the fading hum of his car disappearing into the trees. I stood by the window long after his taillights vanished. My reflection stared back at me, older, softer, marked by both grief and grace. That's when I reached for the old candle. It was small, vanilla-scented, and half burned down, one I'd kept for years in a drawer, wrapped in tissue paper. I used to light it whenever Cameron was out late as a teenager. It became our quiet ritual. The candle by the window meant come home safe. Tonight, I lit it again. The flame flickered weakly at first, then steadied, a trembling, golden heartbeat against the dark glass. I didn't light it for him to see it. Not really. I lit it because part of me needed to remember that love, even wounded, still glows. Somewhere down the road, I imagined his car slowing, maybe even stopping. Maybe he saw the light through the trees. Maybe he knew what it meant. As the candle burned, my thoughts drifted to all the years that had stretched between us like unspoken words. The birthdays missed. The empty chairs at Thanksgiving. The photographs that never got taken. I used to think forgiveness had to be a ceremony, that it needed closure, an apology, a perfect ending. But watching that little flame shimmer, I realized it was simpler than that. Forgiveness wasn't saying it's okay. It was saying I won't carry this weight anymore. The wind shifted. The flame wavered. I closed my eyes and whispered into the quiet, "You're still my son." The air seemed to answer, not in words, but in warmth. That gentle, familiar warmth that fills the room when peace finally enters after years of storm. A few minutes later, a sound startled me, footsteps on the porch. I froze. For a heartbeat, I wondered if I'd imagined it. But then came a soft knock. When I opened the door, there was no one there, only the faint scent of his cologne, carried on the cold night air. And at my feet, a folded piece of paper. I picked it up slowly, my hands trembling, and stepped back inside before opening it. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. "Mom, I saw the light in your window. I know what it means. You never stopped waiting, even when I didn't deserve it. Thank you for still loving me, even from a distance. I'm going to fix my life, not to earn forgiveness, but to honor it. Love, Cameron." The words blurred as I read them, tears falling freely now, not from pain, but release. I sat by the window again, holding the note in one hand, the candle glowing beside me. Outside, the moon hung over the lake like a quiet witness. I could almost see him, parked somewhere down the road, sitting behind the wheel and crying the way he did as a child, silently, shoulders shaking, trying to be strong. For the first time in years, I didn't wish him back. I just wished him peace. Because sometimes, love doesn't need proximity, just presence. And that candle was presence enough. Hours passed. The flame burned lower, softer. I thought about the word forever, how it once terrified me, how it meant unending attachment, unending hurt. But now, it meant something else entirely. Forever wasn't about holding on. It was about believing that what's real between two souls doesn't vanish, even when life fractures it. When the wick finally gave out and the smoke curled toward the ceiling, I whispered, "Good night, my boy." The next morning, I found another envelope by the porch. No address. Just my name, written in the same uncertain handwriting. Inside was a single photo, an old one. Cameron at age 6, standing in front of his first school, missing one tooth and holding a paper flower he'd made for me. On the back, he'd written, "You said once that home isn't a place. It's a person." I didn't understand then. I do now. My chest tightened, not in pain, but in a deep, quiet ache of gratitude. Later that day, I walked down to the lake. The air was cool, and the water was calm, a mirror reflecting everything I'd lived through. I took the note, folded it neatly, and set it in a small wooden box with the letter I'd written months ago, the one I'd never sent. 2 pieces of paper, 2 sides of the same story, one written in pain, the other in grace. I closed the lid gently, then whispered, "We're okay now." That night, I lit the candle again, not for him this time, but for myself. For the woman who had finally learned that love doesn't always mean being invited. Sometimes, it means standing quietly by the window, holding light for someone who's still finding their way back to themselves. And if they never return, the light still matters. He used to say, "Mom, you always wait for me." And tonight, as the candle flickered in the window, I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. I was simply remembering. The next morning, I walked past my old street for the first time in years, and saw something I never expected, another candle glowing faintly in a window across the road. There's a kind of silence that only comes after peace. It's not the hollow quiet that follows heartbreak, it's softer, rounder, like the world has finally stopped holding its breath. Years have passed since the night I lit that candle in the window. The flame that once trembled with grief has become a quiet ritual of remembrance. Cameron moved to another state not long after that night. He started over, slowly, carefully. He made mistakes, but he also learned how to make things right. He called on my birthday every year without fail, and sometimes at Christmas, when the ache of old memories crept back into the air. He'd always start the same way, "Hi, Mom. It's me." And I'd smile, even before answering. I know. Those two words carried everything that needed saying: regret, forgiveness, and love. There was a time when I thought motherhood meant never letting go. That love was something you had to hold on to tightly, like if you loosened your grip, it would slip away forever. But now I understand, love is the one thing that survives release. I didn't lose a son. I gained peace. And in that peace, I found room for both of us to grow. Some mornings, when the lake mist drifts across the water, I make tea and sit by the window with that same old candle. Its glass is cracked now, the wax uneven from years of burning, but it still lights beautifully. I light it for the woman I used to be, the one who waited, worried, and wept. I light it for the son who had to walk through shame to understand truth. And I light it for anyone out there who knows what it's like to love deeply, but be left behind. Because love doesn't die when trust is broken. It changes form, it becomes memory, prayer, hope. Cameron visited one last time, about a year ago. He brought his new wife, kind eyes, gentle smile. The kind of woman who listens more than she talks. We didn't revisit the past. We didn't need to. He hugged me longer than usual before leaving. And as he walked down the porch steps, he turned and said, "Mom, thank you for not giving up on me." I wanted to tell him that giving up and letting go are two different things, but I just smiled. Some truths don't need words. Now, in the quiet rhythm of my days, I find myself reflecting more often. The world moves fast, people chase noise, validation, success. But what matters most are the small things: a steady breath, a cup of tea, a candle still burning even after the storm. And sometimes, walking away really is the loudest way to say I still love you. To anyone watching this, maybe you've been the one forgotten. Maybe you've given your heart, your time, your years, only to feel erased. If that's you, hear me, you're not invisible. You're not unloved. Your worth doesn't vanish just because someone couldn't see it. Sometimes love means stepping back, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. And that step, that quiet, painful, freeing step, is where healing begins. So, tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to love someone from a distance? Would you have done what Elaine did, or would you have opened the door again? Your stories matter. Your voices matter. This space, our space, is for healing, reflection, and truth. If stories like this speak to you, if they remind you that pain can still lead to peace, stay with us here on Voices of Aunty Mae. We share one heartfelt story every week, about love, loss, forgiveness, and the quiet strength that lives in all of us. Subscribe before the next story, not just to follow along, but to remind yourself that even the hardest chapters can end with light. And if you've ever been forgotten by someone you raised, remember this: sometimes, walking away is the loudest way to say I still love you.